So Victoria Castle texts me and she says, "Hi, Pete. It's Victoria Castle, your new stalker." And that's amazing. And so I said, my new stalker, yet another author of one of my favorite books, just burning up my phone.
Of course. Along with Tom Clancy
I know.
and whoever.
Yeah, come on. Right? Oh, God, Stephen King, put him in the spam section. Would you stop, Stephen?
So annoying.
Nobody wants to go to Deary. We don't care. Pennywise ruined my youth. Stop it. So, Victoria, she's amazing.
She's amazing. I gotta say, there's several things. One of my favorite things is when you read something by an author or you get to talk to a favorite singer or something and they're just as cool as their art would suggest they were, right? Like her book is really, it's charming and funny and endearing, and she is entirely all three of those things.
Well, and that this is the thing, like there's no veneer on Victoria. She is 100% present and as excited to be hanging out with us on this podcast as we are to have her there, right? It was a complete mutual love fest, and that is amazing.
It was really amazing. It was really amazing. One of my first clues when I talked to her before the show that she actually walks the walk, walks the talk, that is, was I was saying to her, I'm really interested in working with you as a client. I mean, just based on how long I've loved this book, I wonder, do you ever take clients anymore? And she said, I'm retired, but I do take clients if they are people that I feel could turn around and really share my material in a way where I got to a whole lot more people. And you'd be in that category. And what I realized right then was what a total cycle of abundance answer. Yeah. Right? Like the Trance of Scarcity answer is, well, as long as you don't turn around and share my material with other people because it's in my intellectual property. Hers was, I only want to share this with people who will give my intellectual property away and make money on it.
I think that's why I like her so much, right? Like there is this just sort of, it's that cycle of abundance that we talked about in the second episode, which is this whole idea that, giving and generosity leads to more giving or leads to more sort of, like abundance, right? It's on the tin, which leads to more, the ability to be more generous and more gracious and more abundance. And that's, I think we've litigated that out of so much of our culture of exchange anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's so much mine, because there isn't enough. And if I don't get enough of mine, if you get too much of yours, I won't get enough of mine for sure.
Right.
There's so much of that going on. And she's just sort of generous of spirit in that way too. Just, it was really delightful how excited she got about her own material. She was like, you have to remember, Dodge, I wrote this 15 years ago. And of course I know it really well, but I haven't gotten to read my own book in a while. And I haven't gotten to talk about it with somebody who's all excited about it in a little while because I've been retired. And this is so much fun.
Yeah. It's funny to catch up with somebody at this point in her life where she gets to revisit that like as a lesson in history and feel as exuberant about this as a footprint that she left on the world, which I think is really beautiful. So what'd you learn? Did you learn anything new that you felt like you didn't have your hands around before?
I got a lot from that whole exchange and from rereading the book. And just a review for anybody who's, listening to this a while after hearing the other part. There was a quote I came across as I was thinking about our conversation today that I thought covered things pretty well. She writes, what I learned was the simple but crucial formula. What we believe and what we embody becomes our reality. If we address both causes, our lives change. While the power of belief has been recognized for years, embodiment has been long overlooked, even though it's essential to lasting change. Anything short of embodiment is just chatter. Mm-hmm. That's right there has been what's been sticking with me. I've been just kind of noticing a lot. That just believing it, but not believing it in my body doesn't count. I have to kind of just double check has my body caught up with that idea yet? And when it has, I move forward really differently.
Yeah.
Am I making any sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that reflection is really important because it gets to this idea of state, right? That's how her book is broken up into two parts, state and flow. And that's the whole sort of conversation, the way we approach the conversation as a set of conversations around state and flow, without really using those words, I think have had that lasting impact for me. I find myself taking a more active role in checking in with where I am right now at any given time. Am I here right now? And I actually, my wife comes in the other day and I'm standing here at my desk and she's telling me something about something. Probably we got to do our taxes because that's what we talk about right now. And I lean in and I give her a kiss. And I think she was still talking while I was kissing her. And I stopped and I grabbed her by the shoulders. I said, I just kissed you and you were not here. She said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was not here. And now every time we kiss, it's like this moment where we grab each other's faces and we kiss and then we look at each other hard in the eyes. We're like, are you here? I'm here. Checking in. Are you here? Yeah, we're good. But that to me is so important. All of the sudden, it is the thing I'm thinking about at any given time. Am I here having this conversation with you, or am I scrolling some other website? Am I here in this meeting, or am I writing down notes for something to remember later? Like that's the embodiment for me of state, is how we present at any given moment of time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely it. It was really neat to hear a friend talking about an experience he had, a kind of an experiential weekend, where they were talking about how his body was still holding old pain.
Yeah.
And how his body had grown to kind of protect his heart, where his shoulders slump forward and his back is heavily armored. And they called it turtling.
Oh, God. Are you talking about me?
Right? No, I'm not talking about you, actually. But you might relate to this. Yeah. It's something I relate to, and it's something that a whole lot of people do, that when their heart's been hurt, we take on a body shape that goes with that hurt heart, in part to protect it, but also kind of, as you know, it's like it's almost like the heart has lost a lot of energy, and as it goes dim, everything kind of folds around it, and it sits in the shadows. It becomes kind of a
black hole, sucking in everything around it.
Right. And he was just talking about how the simple act of allowing his shoulders to fall back and away and to kind of let his heart lead a little bit more into the room as he walks into a given situation. And I was just like, wow, you are right out of Victoria's book. Really cool to see this showing up in the world. And that's kind of how we hold pain, right? Like Bessel van der Kolk is a psychiatrist who's one of the world's leading researchers of trauma. And he talks about this in this book called The Body Keeps the Score. Mm-hmm. But what's neat about what you're saying is you're talking about, like, is my body holding joy? Is it here?
Is it present in a given space?
Yeah, that's sort of on the cycle of abundance side. It's still embodiment.
But that's why I look at like state and cycle of abundance stuff as separate elements, because the first is, am I here right now? And the second is, how do I move through the world? Right? That's the cycle of abundance. Like, and I've been trying to notice more and more of that. Like, especially when, I'm not a wealthy man, Dodge. But what I have is time and experience and some skill in some things. And so I've been really thinking about in the last couple of weeks, like, how am I generous with the things I have to give? Because that determines what I do every day. That determines how I relate to other people. And so, one, am I present in the given moment? Am I experiencing what I need to experience with the people and the environment around me? And then, how do I move through this moment, right? How do I take action that is generous and giving, and thus taking part of that cycle of abundance? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. It's cool how different things will stand out. I've been noticing, like, on the trance side, I've just been thinking a lot about that question of, is the universe friendly?
Mm-hmm.
And what I realize is, so what I started to notice was my intellectual answer is absolutely yes. My spiritual beliefs would say, yes, we live in a loving universe, that we are protected, that things are happening ultimately for our good. It takes a long time to explain how I believe that works with really painful things that happen in life, but it makes sense to me intellectually. But I don't embody that very well most of the time. Most of the time, my body's walking around like somebody's about to chuck something at me. Like I hold some tension.
Yeah.
Not all the time, and it's a whole lot better for all the years of, Tai Chi and meditation, whatever, that helps. But I started to get curious about why. What do I unconsciously believe that my body would hold this kind of tension when the rest of me believes something else, right?
Yeah.
What I finally realized was there's this part of me that says, yes, I believe the universe is friendly, but in the sort of the way like a doctor might be here for your own good, as he's about to, reset a dislocated shoulder, like this is going to hurt like hell, but it's for your own good kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And so I believe the universe is ultimately friendly, but that the ride hurts a lot. And I think I'm bracing for pain a lot of the time. I bet you there are folks out there who relate to that, even though I intellectually believe something else. And what started to occur to me is like how much of the time the pain I'm feeling in any given moment is really not even about that moment. I mean, it's just sort of another power of now insight, right? But just sort of another moment where I realize like so much of my contraction ends up being about, I see where this is going, predicting the worst kind of stuff. And when I can come out of that scarcity mentality, having had this great conversation with Victoria, it's really helping me a lot actually to be like, shift the story and the soma at the same time.
I think that's interesting. I don't really truck with the universe is friendly, because the implication of that to me is that the universe also could be an antagonist, right? And I don't believe the universe in so far as, whatever spiritual belief is, I don't believe it has an opinion about me. I find when I'm at my worst, and this is, I know, just sort of restating what you just said, but, with less universe in it, that when I'm at my worst, it's because I am interacting energetically with those around me as a protectionist. Like I'm protecting what's mine. I'm protecting the here and now. I'm protecting the state of change, of stasis, right? I'm protecting myself from having to open a door to something new that is uncertain, that I've never done before, that I'm scared of. And when I am at my best, it's when I'm able to approach my connections and people around me with that sort of generosity of time and spirit and energy and connection, and shake the yoke of that protectionism, that sort of self-protection that ultimately is damaging, if only through stasis rot.
Say more about that.
That to me is something that I think is so dangerous, which is, and I find myself like falling into that pattern all too easily, which is that if I stop moving, if I'm just doing the same thing every day, if I'm not actively looking for ways to change and grow, then I rot a little bit every day from the inside out. I rot. And it manifests in all kinds of funny ways. It manifests in the context of Victoria's conversation, it manifests in that I'm no longer as generous and giving as I want to be. I'm no longer putting away a little bit of my paycheck to go toward our annual charity donations and helping with the issues that are important to us in our community, because I'm trying to protect something else that is mine, all mine. It means the things that I create become boring, right? They become less interesting to listen to me jaw on again about another dumb issue. And so that's rot for me. And the only way to shake free of rot is to move, is to keep moving. I just produced a show, an interview with a woman who's an ultra endurance athlete. And she has this new sort of brand that she's doing with her fitness work. And she trains like NFL, NBA, PGA, Olympics. Like she trains everybody. She's a multi-time Ironman. She's done all kinds of crazy stuff. And her brand is endorphins. It's endurance and then fin, like a shark fin kind of a thing. But the thing that connected with me about that is the thing that sort of inspired her. It's that, like, you have to keep moving, even if you screw up, like, even if you can't finish the next race. If you stop moving, you die, right? Like, you just die. Even if you don't die, you die. Don't die. Keep moving. Don't rot. Keep swimming.
How do you mix that with rest?
Oh, I think the two go absolutely hand in hand, because rest is that sort of, it's like sleep. It's like when your memories write themselves to your brain, right? It's like an opportunity to continue to let yourself process about new stuff that you're doing, about the new energy that you're.
It is moving forward.
It is moving. Rest is movement, right?
Yeah.
I struggle with that. I really do. Like, this is hard, because they're the things I can talk about you and sound like I have a lot of really positive energy about these things. And then I can hang up the podcast and hang up my headphones, and I can sit down and immediately think, oh my God, I'm terrified of whatever comes next. Yeah. Right? Like, I think we all have that to some degree or another.
There's an interesting idea out there that I bumped into just flipping through a training manual, and about the only page I saw was just a quote that jumped off over the weekend that said, in order to feel terrible, we have to do something. Meaning, we have to participate in that. We have to think a thought or hold something in our bodies in a particular way. Yeah. And that was like, I remember at the time that just kind of blowing my mind a little bit in the training, but also just thinking about it over the weekend. I was like, what if that's true? For me to be miserable, I have to do something. Yeah. And if I'm not willing to do that thing to make myself miserable, it shifts. So if I stop holding my body in this way, or stopping my breath in that way, or imagining over and over and over how badly this could go next, or whatever. Like, if I stop doing the things that keep me in misery, I don't have to be miserable like that. I may have to go through natural cycles of expansion and contraction. There are days that feel really good and days that feel sad sometimes, or infuriating or scary. But to feel really miserable, the stuck rot kind of version of it, where I get really in a jam, I have to participate to keep myself there, or I will naturally cycle back upward.
Yeah, that's by just moving, just the act of moving, the act of choosing to do something new and different with the next 5 minutes than maybe you would have done with the same 5 minutes yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah. I wonder about that. Like, I think about that with somebody like you, right? Who you spend a lot of your days in a practice where you meet with people for, I don't know, 50 minutes at a time, one after another, after another, after another. And for them, their act of movement, their act of initiative is coming to talk to you in the first place, right? That's you. Yeah. You're the gift to them to get them into that, to try to shift them into that cycle. But what is that gift for you? Right? How quickly does it become, oh my goodness, I'm in stasis rot. I'm sitting here doing the same thing every day, tomorrow that I did today, the next day that I will do tomorrow. Like, how do you find yourself? Because I think a lot of people do this. Like, if your job is a thing that is to some extent rote, how do you encourage the cycle of abundance? How do you encourage yourself to move out of the trance?
I get what you mean about the movement, but that right now has been less of what I've been thinking about getting out of the trance. What I'm realizing is, do you remember when she was talking about, okay, so during the cycle of abundance, she's talking about aligning and attracting. Let's come back to aligning and attracting, talk about that later. But the receiving and gratitude piece, part of what she talks about there is our capacity to just receive from this moment, coming back to that, right? And our bliss tolerance is deeply tied to our sensation tolerance. How much am I willing to feel sensation at all?
Yeah.
But beyond that, how much am I willing to feel good?
Yeah.
I actively ignore all kinds of beautiful things that feel really good on a regular basis. And the reason I know that is because ever since that conversation with Victoria, I've just been, as a regular practice, trying to just pause and notice what's around me right now that feels good.
Yeah.
To look at or listen to or see or think about.
That's really important,
right?
Because for me, it's been to figure out, like, to remind myself how to engage all my senses in any given moment. Sometimes, you know what? The world smells good. Like, how often do I stop and think, that smells terrific, and not sound like a total creep?
Right. That would be one example.
Yeah.
But I'm noticing I've gotten really good at it, interestingly, just in a matter of days. I mean this completely. Like, now I can I don't have to look all around the room to find something that brings me some pleasure. I can literally look almost anywhere and see something that makes me happy. Like, I'm looking over your shoulder, and folks who can't see us but only hear us don't know that you have this hilarious thing for command strips, which allow you to hang on your wall all kinds of tech that other people might have traded in because you are a total character and a collector, and you've got it all artfully arranged on your wall. So I can see, Apple TVs and iPods of ancient years, and just all these awesome things hanging up together with like sound insulating material to help your studio work even better. And the whole thing just makes me laugh. Like, it's just awesome to look at. And that's directly in front of me. If I move my gaze slightly up above that, I'm looking out a window or over a lovely view of a park. And even on this gray day where all the grass is still brown, there's something so sweet about knowing spring's not far away and it will turn green again. And that makes me happy too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I just let that in a little bit, long enough that my body can feel it, and I do that 20 times a day, even 3 times a day, but I'm starting to do it all the time. If I turn slightly to the right, I see a beautiful piece of art by my brother, and it reminds me that artists are amazing and their gifts blow my mind. And this is a particularly beautiful piece. And I love my brother.
Yeah.
And that's like 20 degrees off axis. Like, it's just, that's feeling so good to me that it isn't just about the keeping going part. It's like right here is fantastic.
Okay. So this might be pretty telling. Is that right? 20 degrees off axis. For me, I have this thing right here. Can you read that?
It says shock potato.
It's the shock potato. It's a shock potato. And it's got these metal diodes. It's a hot potato game, but you put it on extreme setting and turn it on, and it plays the theme music from the movie Psycho. And when you hold it you're supposed to throw it around. If you hold it too long, it shocks the crap out of you. And that's what you have beautiful piece of art. Artists are great. I have the shock potato. I don't know why it's become a totem for my life. It follows me everywhere. I think it might be cursed because I tried to get rid of it and I couldn't. I couldn't let myself get rid of the shock potato. So we may come back to shock potato.
Now, we may need to come back to shock potato, Pete, because I would just like to know, why is it that your entertainment shocks the shit out of you? If you don't do, like, what? Why are you surrounding yourself with things that cause pain? I don't understand it. You ridiculous human.
I did this episode of another show that a friend of both of ours and I was holding it up to the microphone, and I thought that I was holding it, not holding the metal parts so he could hear the music. And I was not. I was touching a metal part, and in the middle of the podcast, it shocks me and I scream and drop it. And it's very uncomfortable. And he made me keep that in the episode because he said it's important. It's identity. That's who I am in any given moment. It's just on the precipice, about to get shocked the crap out of me.
That's right. I think that has something to do with your thoughts about the universe, Pete, and I can't quite put it all together, but I do wonder if your bliss tolerance is as high as your pain tolerance, because
look, let me just tell you, the universe, this is more evidence that the universe does not care about us. If the universe even allows the shock potato to exist,
it couldn't like us at all.
It's proof that he's not an antagonist, but is deeply funny.
Yes, he has got a sense of humor, and he's willing to let you torture yourself as much as you like. That's right.
The universe has a sense of humor.
The question for everybody out there is, how much do you want to be tortured? Do you want a shock potato? Because you can have that too. Apparently, some of you are wanting to make some change in your life, and that's why you keep dialing in to hear us, and this is good.
That's right.
This is good.
She has this whole section in the book that I'm not sure that you talked about that much, which is, it's not about stuff, it's about state, right? We talked about the state part, but not about the stuff part.
What stood out to you about that?
Well, it's just the idea of the things that, the perils of developing connections with things at the expense of flow, right?
Yeah.
The perils of acquisition. And I think that is sort of central to the paradox that we talk about here, right? And I don't want to miss that point, which is we get so panicked about protecting assets that we forget that when we release that pressure, we enable greater interaction with assets. Whether you accumulate more or put more into the world, whatever. It's liberating, and that's the paradox. But that's hard to embrace.
Yeah.
Like, what are the constituent ingredients for figuring out how to release yourself from stuff and flow?
Well, part of why she brings that up is because she's working on this cycle of abundance, right? This idea of, so we align and attract and then move into, the state of receiving and gratitude, and that enables generosity and giving, which lets us do more aligning and attracting, and it goes around and around in a great way. And I really appreciate that she's stopping to say to everybody, abundance isn't about more and more junk. You got plenty of junk. It's the state of mind that goes with it. For some reason, what pops to mind as a funny example is, with the help of my parents, I got a really great guitar for my 40th birthday some time ago now.
I mean, a long time ago. I just don't want, it was a long...
it was like a generation ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, people were still carving stuff to send to write.
When I turned 40.
Yeah.
And I really lucked out. I mean, this thing has just got such a lovely tone. It's beautiful to look at, but it really plays beautifully. And I love this guitar. And there are musicians here in Nashville who have whole huge storage units, warehouses full of collector guitars, and every single one of them is fancier than this one. And all those guitars are sitting in the dark somewhere in a climate-controlled room, not being loved.
Mm-hmm.
And more stuff wouldn't get me to any more pleasure. I could have 27 of these things and probably enjoy this one far less than I do just having the one, you know?
Absolutely.
Yep. It's really about state.
We were just talking about that before. I had the same guitar challenge, right? That I had a second guitar and I sold it because having two guitars, it turns out, does not give me twice the amount of joy in playing a guitar. Maybe because I can only play one at a time. Maybe because the second one was a shock guitar.
It was electric.
Every time you hit a strong G power chord, shock the crap out of you. It was real. There's a real price to pay for that one.
Might have been a wiring problem,
right?
But anyway, I'm glad that you've found a new home for that.
But that's really, I mean, that to me is something I feel like we need to reflect on, which is like it doesn't like that's the things like as I look at the things in my life, the things that I keep around me, the things that I put on my wall, like I would not classify a single thing up on my wall of treasures as junk, right? Everything there has a specific memory, a specific association to my past that is important to me. And so that has become the spirit of this room, of my studio here, that is, it's covered in me. It is my identity. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes that looks like chaos, but
it doesn't look like chaos to me. It just looks like a wonderful collection of playthings from a really just, inherently playful guy. Like you love play and you just have got such a way with gadgets that's one of the ways you play. Makes sense to me. That. But that's a piece of the receiving and gratitude. Well, there's one other thing I did want to highlight that I never quite got to talk to Victoria about, which was the way she talks about aligning and attracting. Yeah. I've always read that section of the book a little differently. She talks about aligning in terms of aligning with what is before working on attracting what's next, right? Mm-hmm. There's another way to look at it that I think is fun to play with, which is aligning with what you hope to attract. And the way I play with that is to notice, so when I go to imagine something working out the way I want it to work out, what does my body do? So I did this right before our podcast started. You might have caught that I closed my eyes for 20, 30 seconds and just said, hold up a sec. And what I was doing there was imagining us having a perfectly delightful conversation that was helpful to somebody out there, right? That felt like we got to the high points and that I'd feel good about all day. And then I just noticed, what does my body do when I imagine that? You'd think my body, every time I imagined a happy, desirable outcome, would go to a happy, desirable state. It often doesn't. The first thing I noticed was my shoulders are still tight. My chest is still kind of tense. And that is not a relaxing thought to me yet, which told me I was not aligned with that as something I actually wanted to attract yet.
Oh, wait. No, I don't. Now I'm not with you anymore.
I could hold in my mind a vision of, let's have a great conversation, Pete and Dodge, about Victoria, and that I'd feel good about it all day. But if really I was ready to attract that, my body would relax and align with it. And it would begin to feel all the things you might feel when you imagine something lovely happening, right? Like if you're aligned with eating a lemon, even in your mind, your mouth will start to water if you imagine it enough. But if you're not really imagining that lemon and you're not aligned with it, your body won't respond yet. So,
okay.
You with me yet?
Well, kind of. I have a response, but I want you to finish your thought.
Okay, so just finishing the thought then. So what I'm doing is I'm just noticing, so when something is coming up, like a podcast recording or a session with a client, or I've got some time to play with my son, or I'm off to, Kung Fu training. I'm just more and more noticing setting an intention around it, kind of an attention of attraction, an intention to say, I choose to attract to myself a great experience. But then I'm pausing to breathe long enough that I let my body catch up with that attraction. So that I'm in effect beginning to receive and feel grateful for it before it even comes. And when I do that, it works out so much better, so much more often.
Okay, I'm glad I let you finish, because to me, my first thought there is I hit that experience of discomfort where I'm physically, like, I'm having that sort of somatic experience of disconnect and stress, and I write that off as anxiety.
Yes.
I think a lot of us do. I think I think you just taught me something really important, that is that it's possible I'm not seeing it through, right? I'm stopping at anxiety and letting that be kind of the universal sort of reason for pain.
Yes. And I would encourage everybody out there to play with. So whatever moment you're going to go into later today, I'd encourage you to imagine it going as you hoped it would go. Or let's say what you're hoping to attract is a better job, a higher income, a great new boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever it is you hope to attract. Notice what's going on in your body when you imagine that. And if your body immediately begins to celebrate as though it were already true, you're aligned with that. If your body goes into tension, it's not there yet. And that's okay. But just notice where your body really is and keep breathing for a minute and see if you can move your body into a state that feels aligned with what you hope to attract. So much so that you can almost begin to move into the next stages of receiving and gratitude ahead of time. It's really interesting how it helps me become available for the life I want to have, or the afternoon I want to have, or the lunch I want to have. It doesn't have to be that big.
Right. That's interesting. That's good. I can do that.
Yeah. It's fun to play with. If this is a good place, if you got more you want to talk about, or you want to start to wrap up?
Yeah.
You about to do?
Yeah.
I was thinking, and I forgot to ask you about this ahead of time. I was thinking maybe we would do a bonus experiential exercise. And I just wanted to read aloud one of the many, many wonderful experiential practices in Victoria's book.
Great.
We talked about it a little bit, and it was her Tonglen practice of kind of joining with something that's pleasurable that's around you and taking that fully in and then making an offering of it. And it is such a fantastic way to practice the cycle of abundance, of the kind of aligning and attracting, the receiving and gratitude, but then, this additional piece of generosity and giving. And you can do it all in a few breaths without feeling like these are giant stages, that you need to spend weeks on. Does this make sense?
Let's do it.
You want to try it? Okay, everybody. Bonus experiential exercise coming straight out of Victoria's amazing book, which you do need to buy, called The Trance of Scarcity. And on page 162, she has this really lovely practice of generosity that comes out of the Buddhist traditions. There are other ways to interpret Tonglen and other ways to use it and other versions of this practice, but this is a particular way she does it, and it's beautiful to me. Let me read to you what she writes. As a resident of the circle, and by the circle in this context, she's talking about one who believes the world can be friendly. You can have enough and be enough. There is not a constant state of never enoughness in your version of the universe. She says, I recommend a practice called Tonglen, inspired by the ancient Tibetan Buddhist meditation. This version is a simple and elegant way to join with others and to share your joy. The practice is done in the spirit of acknowledging that we are all connected, that we all share the experience of life. So here goes. First, find 3 occasions each day when you feel full, blessed, joyful, or expanded in some way. And take a moment to embrace the experience on behalf of all beings. The gift you embrace can be as simple as fresh air, good soup, or a full tank of gas. Number 2, breathe in the richness of the moment and breathe out the thought, may everyone know. Fill in the blank like this. You can fill in the blank with peace, or joy, or ease, or happiness, or pleasure, or nourishment, or freedom, or beauty, or love. You choose. May everyone know this feeling. Number 3, feel your connectedness. Whatever affects one person directly affects all of us indirectly. What happens for you when you freely share your bounty? Does your experience of abundance diminish or does it increase? Number 4, do this practice anytime you notice a tendency to feel separate, insufficient, or shut down. Let me give you an example of how I've been doing that all week.
Yeah.
I walk into my office and the door happens to be right in the corner of the office, literally on the corner, like on the diagonal. So as I walk into my office, I'm blessed to have a corner view where I have 2 windows to my left and 2 to my right, overlooking Vanderbilt and West End and Midtown of Nashville and Centennial Park. And it's a lot of sky because they're tall windows and just a lot of beauty. And every time I walk in, I try to just pause and take in a couple of breaths of just saying thank you for this beautiful light, for this view, for this spaciousness created by the windows in my life. And for a moment, for a breath, I'll send that sense I have in my chest, in my body, to everybody. But then I've especially been sending it to people who are stuck in prison cells or hospital rooms or cubicles without windows, who don't happen to have that kind of fortune on this particular day, who couldn't even get to a window if they asked nicely. And I try to imagine that somehow everyone in the world who needs a view for a moment, who needs to be able to just relax their focus on something far away, would have the sense of peace I have and the gratitude I have when I look out those windows. And then I just pause for one more breath and I notice, what does it feel like to have taken that in, fully appreciated it, and given it to all I can? And it feels freaking wonderful. The gratitude grows exponentially when there is this inflow and outflow. So play with that anywhere you can. Maybe it's, appreciation for a belonging or an adorable pet or your beautiful kid, or that you have a toothbrush and there are people in the world who don't even have a toothbrush.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, everybody. Love you, Pete.
Love you, B.